The air inside the grand hall felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Crystal chandeliers hung above rows of white marble seats, throwing soft light across silk gowns and tailored suits. Gold-trimmed pillars stretched toward the ceiling, and fresh white roses lined the aisle in perfect symmetry. Every detail had been planned, approved, and polished. Nothing here was left to chance. This was not just a wedding. This was an event. Outside, news vans crowded the gates. Cameras waited for the moment the billionaire would seal his future with a single, "I do." Investors, politicians, celebrities, and old rivals filled the room, smiling and whispering. Some were here for love. Most were here to witness power made permanent. At the front stood the groom. He was calm on the surface, standing tall in a custom black suit that probably cost more than most homes. His posture was steady. His face was controlled. He had learned long ago that emotion was something you managed, not something you showed. Today was supposed to be the final proof that he had won. The music softened. Guests leaned forward. Phones were raised. The officiant cleared his throat. This was the moment the world had been waiting for. Then everything stopped. At first it was subtle. A pause that felt too long. A faint sound that didn't belong. Heads turned. Whispers spread like ripples across still water. The music cut out. A murmur rolled through the room. The billionaire frowned, his eyes scanning the crowd. He felt it then, an unease he couldn't explain. A pressure in his chest that had nothing to do with nerves. This wasn't fear. He didn't fear moments like this. He feared losing control. Someone rushed down the aisle, speaking urgently to a security guard. Another guard moved toward the front. The officiant stepped back, confused. Guests began to sit up straighter, their smiles fading into curiosity. "What's happening?" someone whispered. No one answered. The billionaire's jaw tightened. He took a slow breath, reminding himself that interruptions happened. Problems could be handled. Everything could be fixed. But then he saw the look on the guard's face. It wasn't panic. It was recognition. The guard leaned in and spoke quietly. The words didn't carry, but the effect did. Color drained from the billionaire's face. His hands curled slightly at his sides. For a brief second, the room vanished. A memory surfaced, unwanted and sharp. A quiet voice. A cautious warning. A moment he had brushed aside like dust. He swallowed. The guests watched as minutes stretched on. Cameras kept rolling. The silence grew uncomfortable, then heavy. This was no longer romantic suspense. This was something else. Something wrong. The bride turned toward him, confusion in her eyes. He didn't meet her gaze. His mind raced back to that day. The janitor. He had barely noticed the man at the time. A uniform. A mop. A presence that blended into the background. The warning had come out of nowhere, spoken softly, respectfully. It had sounded inconvenient, unimportant, almost insulting. He had dismissed it in seconds. Now, standing at the altar, surrounded by wealth and witnesses, that same warning echoed in his head with terrifying clarity. "You should look into this. I don't think it's safe. I didn't want to be wrong." He had been so sure the man didn't know what he was talking about. The billionaire felt his throat tighten. Around him, whispers turned into tension. Smiles disappeared. Phones lowered. The dreamlike glow of the hall faded, replaced by cold awareness. This wasn't a delay. This was a reckoning. A door at the side of the hall opened. More guards entered. Someone near the front gasped. The officiant stepped completely aside now, unsure of his role. The billionaire finally moved, stepping back from the altar as if it no longer belonged to him. Every instinct told him to deny it, to shut it down, to push forward and pretend nothing was wrong. But something deep inside him knew the truth. Whatever he had ignored was no longer willing to stay hidden. The wedding that was meant to prove his power had become the stage for his consequences. And as the room waited in silence, one truth settled heavily over him. Some warnings don't come with noise. They come quietly. And they wait. Long before the chandeliers, the cameras, and the silence of the halted wedding, there had been a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of empty offices late at night. The quiet of unanswered calls. The quiet of a man who believed sleep was for people who couldn't afford ambition. He had built his empire one ruthless choice at a time. In the beginning, he told himself he had no other option. He came from nothing, no safety net, no powerful last name, no second chances. While others hesitated, he acted. While others worried about feelings, he worried about results. And results came fast. He learned early that control was everything. Control of time. Control of people. Control of outcomes. Something slowed him down, it was removed. Someone questioned him, they were replaced. Trust, to him, was inefficient. He believed the world rewarded strength, not softness. Numbers mattered more than names. Loyalty was useful only as long as it produced value. And empathy? Empathy was a distraction dressed up as virtue. As his wealth grew, so did the walls around him. He stopped making friends. He started making deals. Conversations became short, sharp, and purposeful. Every relationship was measured by what it offered and what it cost. If the balance tilted the wrong way, he walked away without looking back. People admired him for it. They called him disciplined, visionary, fearless. But admiration came from a distance. Up close, people felt cold around him, like standing too near polished steel. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and chose not to care. The wedding was supposed to be the final symbol of his success. Not just a promise of love, but a public statement. A merging of influence. A future that looked strong on paper. Love was part of it. He told himself that often. But love, to him, was something you managed carefully, like a brand. The ceremony had been planned the same way he planned everything else. Perfect timing. Perfect optics. Perfect guests. Nothing unpredictable. Nothing messy. He believed marriage, like business, worked best when emotion stayed in its place. What he never admitted, even to himself, was how lonely the climb had been. At the top, there was no one left who spoke to him without fear or expectation. Laughter around him always felt practiced. Compliments felt rehearsed. Silence felt safer than honesty. He told himself that was the price of greatness. But deep down there were moments, rare and unwelcome, when doubt crept in. Late nights when success felt heavy instead of satisfying. When the wins felt empty the moment after they arrived. He buried those thoughts quickly. Reflection was dangerous. Reflection slowed you down. There were decisions in his past he never revisited. Partnerships ended too sharply. Employees dismissed too quickly. Warnings ignored because they came from the wrong mouths. He told himself those moments were necessary. Collateral damage on the road to something bigger. He never asked who paid the price. Standing at the altar earlier that day, he had felt powerful. Surrounded by proof that his way had worked. Wealth, status, attention, control. But now, as the memory of the interruption burned in his mind, something cracked. For the first time in years he felt exposed. Not because he lacked money. Not because he lacked influence. But because he realized something vital had been missing all along. No one around him truly knew him. And worse, no one felt safe enough to challenge him. That quiet warning from the janitor came back again, sharper this time. Not just the words, but the way they were spoken. Come, careful, honest, no demand, no fear. He had brushed it off because it didn't come wrapped in power. And now, as his perfect day unraveled, the truth became uncomfortable and clear. He had built companies. He had built wealth. He had built a name that commanded rooms. But he had never built trust. And without trust, even the strongest structures eventually fail. The janitor arrived before the building woke up. Long before the elevators hummed and the glass doors swung open, he moved through the halls with slow, steady steps. His shoes made soft sounds against polished floors that others crossed without ever noticing. He carried a small cart with worn handles, each scratch telling a quiet story of years past. To most people he was invisible. Executives walked past him while talking into phones. Assistants rushed by, eyes fixed on screens. Security guards nodded out of habit, not recognition. No one asked his name. No one wondered where he came from. And he never asked them to notice him. He had learned long ago that being overlooked came with a strange kind of freedom. From that freedom he observed everything. He noticed which offices stayed lit long after midnight. He noticed which voices grew sharp behind closed doors. He noticed the way tension lingered in certain rooms even after people left. The building spoke to him in ways it didn't speak to anyone else. He listened. Every morning he cleaned the same floors with care, not because anyone watched, but because he believed in doing things right even when no one was looking. He straightened chairs others kicked aside. He wiped fingerprints from glass walls that framed powerful conversations. The building held secrets and he saw their shadows. His life outside those walls was simple, quiet, measured. He lived alone in a small apartment that stayed neat out of habit, not pride. Loss had shaped him early, teaching him that loud dreams often break first. He had once trusted the wrong people. He had once believed promises that didn't hold. The cost of that mistake had followed him ever since, heavy but instructive. It taught him caution. It taught him patience. It taught him when to speak, and when to stay silent. But it never took away his sense of right and wrong. That was why the unease began. At first it was just a feeling. A pattern that didn't sit right. A detail that didn't belong. Something in the building's rhythm felt off. Papers left out too carelessly. Conversations that stopped too suddenly when he entered. Locked rooms that hadn't been locked before. He didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble found him. Each night, as he emptied bins and cleaned desks, the picture grew clearer. Something was wrong. Not broken. Not messy. Something carefully hidden. And the more he understood, the heavier his steps became. He knew the billionaire only by reputation. Everyone did. The man whose name opened doors. The man whose presence filled rooms without effort. The man who never looked down. From a distance, the janitor saw him sometimes. Moving fast. Surrounded by people. Always in control. The janitor knew what it meant to stand in rooms where no one listened. Still, the knowledge he carried began to feel unbearable. He told himself it wasn't his place. He told himself powerful men didn't want advice from people like him. He told himself that speaking up could cost him the one thing he still had, his job. But silence began to feel like a heavier cost. Every night, the building felt more tense. Every morning, his reflection in the glass looked more tired. He slept less. Thought more. He remembered the price of ignoring the truth. And so, slowly, carefully, he made a decision. Not for recognition. Not for reward. But because warning someone, even someone who wouldn't listen, felt better than living with regret. He practiced the words in his head. Simple words. Respectful words. No accusations. No demands. Just concern. The janitor didn't see himself as brave. He saw himself as responsible. And responsibility, he knew, often went unnoticed. As he pushed his cart down the hallway toward the executive floors, his hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what he knew. He didn't know how the billionaire would react. But he knew one thing for certain. Once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. The janitor waited 3 days before he spoke. Not because he hoped the feeling would pass, but because he needed to be sure. He checked and rechecked what he had seen. He followed the patterns quietly, making sure his worry wasn't just imagination. Each day the signs became harder to ignore. By the third night he knew. The truth sat heavy in his chest as he pushed his cart down the hallway toward the executive offices. His reflection followed him in the glass walls, older than he felt, more tired than he wanted to admit. He stopped outside a large office with the lights still on. Inside was the billionaire. The janitor hesitated. His hand hovered near the door, then dropped. He told himself this was foolish. That men like that didn't listen to men like him. That he would be brushed aside, maybe even punished. But he thought of the consequences of staying silent. So he knocked. The sound felt too small for the room it entered. The billionaire looked up, annoyed. His time was valuable and interruptions were not welcome. He didn't recognize the janitor at first. Just another uniform. Another background figure. Yes, the billionaire said without warmth. The janitor stepped in carefully, keeping his voice low and calm. He didn't accuse. He didn't panic. He chose his words with care, like stepping across thin ice. He explained that he had noticed something unusual. Something connected to internal operations. Something that didn't feel right. He made it clear he could be mistaken. He made it clear he wasn't asking for anything. He was only warning him. The billionaire listened for less than a minute. Then he smiled, a tight, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned back in his chair and waved a hand slightly as if brushing away dust. You don't need to worry about things that aren't your responsibility, he said. The words landed harder than a shout. The janitor tried once more. Just a small push. A careful reminder that it might be worth checking. That problems ignored had a way of growing. That was when the billionaire's tone changed. Not angry. Not loud. Dismissive. He questioned how the janitor could possibly understand matters at that level. He reminded him, politely but clearly, of his position. Of boundaries. Of knowing one's place. The message was unmistakable. You don't belong in this conversation. The janitor felt heat rise to his face. Not from shame, but from the quiet pain of being unseen. He nodded, apologized for interrupting, and stepped back toward the door. The billionaire had already returned to his screen. The conversation was over. As the door closed, the janitor stood still for a moment, his hand resting on the handle. He felt small, not because he was wrong but because the truth had no power in that room. He walked away without another word. The halls felt longer than usual. The building, once familiar, now felt cold. Each step echoed with a question he couldn't answer. Had he done enough? Over the next few days he avoided the executive floor. He kept his head down. Did his work. Spoke only when spoken to. No one mentioned the warning. No one asked questions. Life moved on as if nothing had happened. But inside the janitor something shifted. He carried a quiet humiliation, not because he had spoken, but because he had been reminded how easily truth could be ignored when it came from the wrong mouth. He told himself he had tried. That was all he could do. Still, the weight didn't lift. He watched from a distance as preparations for the wedding accelerated. Decorations arrived. Staff buzzed with excitement. The building began to glow with celebration. And yet, beneath the polish, the janitor sensed tension tightening like a knot. He continued his routine, but now every polished floor felt like a warning sign no one would read. Every clean surface felt like a cover pulled too tight over something dangerous. The billionaire, meanwhile, never thought about the conversation again. To him it had been nothing. A brief interruption. A moment already forgotten. He believed the problem had been handled by ignoring it. He didn't realize that arrogance often feels like confidence right up until the moment it collapses. And somewhere between the janitor's silence and the billionaire's certainty, fate began to move. Quietly. Patiently. Without asking permission. After the warning was dismissed, life seemed to reward the billionaire. His companies posted record profits. Headlines praised his leadership. Invitations poured in. The wedding plans moved forward without delay. From the outside, everything looked flawless. Success wrapped around him like armor. But inside something felt off. At first it was small enough to ignore. A restless night. A moment of irritation that came too quickly. A sense that conversations ended just a little too fast when he entered the room. He told himself it was stress. Big moments came with pressure. That was normal. Still, the feeling stayed. He noticed it during meetings when numbers lined up perfectly but satisfaction didn't follow. He noticed it during phone calls when laughter sounded forced. He noticed it late at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why sleep wouldn't come. The more he pushed forward, the heavier the unease became. There were signs. Quiet ones. A partner hesitated before answering a simple question. An assistant double-checked instructions more often than before. A document crossed his desk that felt rushed, incomplete. He dismissed each one. He had always believed doubt was weakness, and weakness had no place in his life. The janitor, meanwhile, continued his work in silence. He watched the building change as the wedding approached. Fresh flowers replaced neutral decor. Security tightened. Hallways once quiet buzzed with excitement. People smiled more, spoke louder, moved faster. But the janitor noticed what the excitement covered. Doors closed more often. Conversations dropped to whispers. Eyes avoided his as he passed. The tension in the air felt sharp, like static before a storm. The janitor felt responsible in a way no one else could see. He had warned him. That was true. But the knowledge was still there, sitting heavy in his mind. Every night he asked himself the same question. What happens if I'm right? The answer scared him. Back in his office, the billionaire kept building plans for the future. New ventures. New expansions. A legacy that would outlive him. He spoke about trust and partnership in public, confident and smooth. In private he trusted no one. He reviewed contracts obsessively. He questioned motives. He controlled every detail. The tighter he held on, the more strained things felt. He didn't see it yet, but his grip was creating fractures. Small problems began to appear. A delayed approval here. A missing file there. Nothing serious enough to stop the machine, but enough to create friction. He blamed others. Someone wasn't paying attention. Someone wasn't performing. Someone else needed to be replaced. That was how it had always worked. But this time the answers didn't bring relief. The wedding date grew closer. The world watched. Articles praised the union as a symbol of stability and strength. A perfect match. A perfect future. The billionaire read those words and felt a strange distance from them. He was winning. So why did it feel like he was standing on something unstable? The janitor sensed the shift too. He moved through the building with the same care as always, but now every step felt heavier. He noticed small mistakes others made, rushed cleaning, missed details. He fixed them quietly, not because they mattered, but because order helped him breathe. At night, he lay awake, replaying the warning he had given, wondering if there was something more he should have done. Something braver. But the door had closed. The moment had passed. Or so it seemed. Neither man realized that the cracks forming were not random. They were connected. Each ignored sign, each brushed off concern, each act of control added pressure. And pressure, when it builds unseen, doesn't fade. It waits. From the outside their love looked perfect. They met in rooms filled with light and confidence, where success was spoken fluently and dreams were framed in ambition. Together they made sense to the world. Power and grace. vision and charm. A future that photographed well from every angle. But love is not built on appearances alone. In private moments, the billionaire struggled to be fully present. He listened, but he didn't open up. He cared, but carefully. His mind was always working, always planning, always guarding something unseen. He told himself this was maturity. He told himself this was strength. When his partner asked simple questions, about stress, about doubt, about the weight he carried, he brushed them aside with reassurance and confidence. Everything was under control. Everything was handled. That was his answer to everything. What he didn't say was that control had become his shield. Vulnerability felt dangerous. Admitting uncertainty felt like weakness. And weakness, he believed, was how things fell apart. His partner sensed the distance even if she couldn't name it. There were moments when she watched him closely, as if waiting for something deeper. When laughter faded too quickly. When silence stayed a little too long. She loved him, but love without honesty left her guessing. She didn't push too hard. She had learned that people like him didn't respond well to pressure. So instead, she hoped time would soften him. The wedding became the symbol of that hope. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a promise that the future would be different. That commitment would bring closeness. That vows would open doors he had kept shut. The billionaire embraced the planning of the wedding with the same focus he gave his business. Details mattered. Precision mattered. Every choice reflected stability and success. But love isn't a project you manage. Behind the scenes, unspoken truths stayed buried. Questions went unanswered. Doubts were wrapped in polite smiles. Neither of them wanted to disrupt the momentum. Not now. Not so close to the day. The janitor saw these moments in passing. He noticed the way conversations between them sometimes stopped when others entered the room. He noticed how the billionaire's tone changed when questions turned personal. He noticed how the bride-to-be smiled through moments that felt heavier than they looked. The janitor didn't know their story, but he recognized the pattern. He had seen it before in other lives. People building futures while ignoring the ground beneath them. Love needs honesty the way buildings need strong foundations. Without it, cracks form quietly. As the wedding approached, excitement filled the air. Interviews were scheduled. Guest lists finalized. Expectations climbed higher with every passing day. The billionaire felt proud. This was proof that his life made sense. That all the sacrifices, the hard choices, the emotional distance, it all led here. But late at night, when the noise faded, he felt the same unease return. He thought about the warning he had dismissed. Not directly, but as a shadow at the edge of his thoughts. Something unfinished. Something unresolved. He pushed it away. The janitor, meanwhile, felt his concern deepen. The wedding was being built on layers of silence. Silence about risks. Silence about truths. Silence about trust. He wondered if love could survive what was coming. But he also knew something else. Once people commit to a vision, they often refuse to see anything that threatens it. Even if that threat is real. Even if it stands quietly nearby, holding a truth no one wants to hear. As flowers filled the hall and vows were rehearsed, the fault line beneath the celebration grew wider, unseen but ready. Love was being promised. But honesty had never been invited. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in light and expectation. From early dawn, the venue buzzed with activity. Staff moved quickly through the halls, adjusting flowers, polishing glass, straightening chairs that were already straight. Every surface gleamed. Every detail whispered importance. Outside, crowds gathered behind barriers. Cameras were set up hours before guests arrived. News outlets prepared their stories in advance, ready to call the day historic, unforgettable, perfect. Inside, the billionaire stood in a private room, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked calm, confident, untouchable. This was his moment. Years of ambition, discipline, and sacrifice had led here. The world would see not just a successful man, but a fulfilled one. A man who had it all. He took a deep breath and smiled at his reflection. There was no room for doubt today. The bride prepared in another room, surrounded by quiet support. She stared at herself in the mirror longer than necessary, searching for reassurance. She reminded herself that love was a choice, that commitment required faith. She hoped this day would change something between them. Guests began to arrive, filling the hall with color and conversation. Laughter echoed against marble walls. Music floated softly in the air. Wealth and influence gathered in one place, dressed in elegance and expectation. The janitor arrived early as always. He moved through the building with his cart, staying out of sight, doing what he had done for years. Yet today everything felt different. He felt like an outsider in a world he knew too well. As he passed the decorated hall, he slowed. The beauty was undeniable. The effort, the joy. For a moment he almost hoped he had been wrong, that the warning he gave had been unnecessary. But the feeling in his chest didn't fade. He saw guards positioned near doors, staff whispering, phones buzzing with nervous energy. It wasn't chaos, yet. It was something tighter, more controlled, like breath held too long. As the ceremony time approached, the billionaire stepped into the main hall. Applause followed him naturally. Heads turned. Smiles widened. This was the man of the hour. He felt powerful. Every step down the aisle reinforced his belief that he stood above doubt, above consequences, above mistakes. The janitor watched from the edge of the room, unnoticed. He saw the way the billionaire's smile never reached his eyes. He saw the bride's hopeful tension. He saw the guests lean forward, hungry for a moment they could photograph and remember. He also saw something else. Tiny details falling into place. A quiet exchange between staff. A guard checking his earpiece twice. A door that stayed closed longer than it should have. The janitor's hands tightened around his cart. The music began. The room softened. Conversations faded. The moment had arrived. And then, something shifted. The billionaire felt it first. A strange pause. A delay that didn't belong. The rhythm of the room faltered. The confidence he had built so carefully wavered just slightly. He looked to the side. Security moved. Whispers spread. The janitor's heart sank. This was it. Whatever truth had been ignored, whatever warning had been dismissed, was no longer waiting. The world, watching from behind screens and lenses, sensed it too. The air changed. The excitement thinned into uncertainty. Smiles froze. Cameras kept rolling. The billionaire stood at the center of it all, still smiling out of habit, still believing he could control what came next. But inevitability doesn't ask permission. It arrives when it's ready. And as the first sign of disruption rippled through the hall, one truth became clear. This day was never meant to end the way it began. The interruption did not announce itself with noise. It arrived with silence. The music stopped first. Not smoothly, but suddenly, as if someone had cut the sound mid-breath. Heads turned. A few guests laughed nervously, thinking it was a mistake. It wasn't. Security moved again, this time with purpose. Two guards stepped closer to the front. One spoke urgently into an earpiece. Another scanned the room, eyes sharp, posture tense. The billionaire felt his smile stiffen. This was no longer a delay. This was a problem. He looked toward the officiant, then toward his partner, searching for reassurance. He found none. Her expression had shifted from excitement to confusion, and then to something darker, concern. A man in a dark suit approached from the side. He wasn't part of the ceremony team. He didn't belong here. He carried a folder. The billionaire recognized that look immediately. He had seen it in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in moments when power changed hands. The man stopped just short of the altar. The room held its breath. Words were spoken quietly, but their impact was loud. The billionaire's face drained of color as he scanned the pages inside the folder. His hands tightened, knuckles whitening. For a moment he didn't move. Then the whispers began. A legal issue. A betrayal. Documents filed that morning. Evidence no one could ignore. The truth didn't explode, it spread. Guests leaned toward one another, trying to understand. Phones came out again, but now not for celebration. Messages were sent. News feeds updated in real time. The story changed while everyone was still sitting in their seats. The bride turned to him fully now. Her voice was low, but the pain in her eyes was unmistakable. She asked a question he couldn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because the answer confirmed what she feared. He had known something was wrong. And he had said nothing. The billionaire opened his mouth, then closed it. His confidence, so practiced, failed him. The room that once fed his power now reflected his weakness. Across the hall, the janitor stood frozen. He didn't want to be right. But as the pieces fell into place, he recognized every sign. The rushed documents. The sealed doors. The sudden urgency. This was exactly what he had tried to warn about. His chest tightened. People turned toward the billionaire, no longer impressed, no longer admiring. Curiosity shifted into judgment. Respect cracked. Some guests stood. Others stared openly. A few shook their heads. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about trust. The officiant stepped back completely, unsure what to do. The ceremony had dissolved into confusion. The vows were forgotten. The future paused. Security quietly cleared space near the front. Legal representatives moved closer. The atmosphere grew cold, stripped of romance and warmth. The billionaire felt exposed in a way he never had before. Not because of the documents, not because of the public setting, but because the truth had arrived exactly as it was, without apology, without negotiation. He remembered the janitor's calm voice, the careful words, the respect. And now, standing in front of everyone who believed in him, he understood the cost of his dismissal. His partner stepped back, creating distance that felt larger than the hall itself. Her silence was louder than any accusation. The janitor caught her expression and looked away. He didn't feel victory. He felt grief. The billionaire took a step back from the altar. The symbolism hit him harder than the reality. This stage was no longer his. Reporters outside sensed the shift. Inside, the celebration was gone. In its place stood a room full of witnesses to a collapse. Not loud, not dramatic, but complete. The billionaire finally spoke, but his voice lacked authority. It sounded human, unsteady, small. No one clapped. No one smiled. The truth had finished its work. And in that moment, as the wedding stood frozen in unfinished promise, the warning he once ignored became undeniable. Some truths wait patiently. Some consequences choose their moment carefully. And when they arrive, they do not ask if you are ready. When the hall finally emptied, the silence felt heavier than the crowd ever had. Chairs stood half-pulled from their neat rows. Programs lay scattered across the marble floor. Flowers that once symbolized joy now looked tired, bent under the weight of a celebration that never happened. The billionaire stood alone near the front of the hall. Hours earlier, this space had been filled with admiration. Now it held only echoes. His reflection stared back at him from the glass walls, familiar yet changed. For the first time, he didn't recognize the man looking back. The cameras were gone, but their presence lingered in his mind. Headlines were already forming. Messages buzzed on his phone, one after another. He didn't open them. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to know what people were saying. The bride had left quietly. There was no argument. No dramatic exit. Just distance. The kind that settles when words are no longer enough. That absence hurt more than any accusation. The billionaire sat down slowly, his confidence draining away with the movement. His shoulders slumped. His hands rested in his lap, empty. He had lost more than a wedding. He had lost certainty. In the days that followed, the world moved on, but not for him. Meetings were postponed. Partners avoided eye contact. Calls went unanswered. The respect he once commanded had softened into caution. People no longer feared him. They watched him. The isolation was new, uncomfortable, deafening. At night, he replayed the warning over and over in his mind. The calm voice, the respectful tone. The moment he had chosen dismissal over curiosity, he realized something painful. Ignoring the warning had not been a mistake of intelligence. It had been a mistake of pride. Across the city, the janitor felt the weight of the fallout in quieter ways. He returned to work the next day as he always had, pushing his cart through familiar halls. But something had changed. People looked at him differently now. Some avoided him. Others stared too long. A supervisor pulled him aside, asked careful questions. Not accusing but uneasy. The janitor answered honestly, calmly. Truth had a way of unsettling people. He felt no relief, no satisfaction, only a tired sadness. He had spoken up to prevent harm, not to cause it. Yet consequences rarely follow clean lines. He worried about his job, about being blamed, about being misunderstood. But deeper than that, he worried about something else. He worried about the cost of truth. The billionaire, now alone in his large, quiet home, began to reflect in ways he never had before. Without noise to distract him, memories surfaced uninvited. People he had dismissed. Warnings he had ignored. Moments where listening might have changed everything. He had believed power protected him. Instead, it had isolated him. The janitor, sitting in his small apartment that night, stared at the ceiling, wondering if silence might have been easier. Wondering if he would choose differently if given another chance. But deep down he knew the answer. Both men stood at crossroads they hadn't chosen, but could no longer avoid. One had lost status and certainty. The other had risked safety and comfort. And for the first time, their paths felt closer than ever before. Because collapse, when faced honestly, can be the beginning of something else. In the quiet that followed the collapse, both men began to change, though neither planned to. For the billionaire, the days felt longer than they ever had before. Without meetings filling every hour, time slowed. Silence followed him from room to room, pressing against thoughts he had avoided for years. He began to see his past differently. Moments he once called strength now looked like fear. Control now felt like avoidance. Confidence, he realized, had often been a mask. He remembered faces, people who had tried to warn him, advise him, challenge him. He had pushed them aside, believing his success proved he knew better. Now success offered no comfort. The cost of blindness revealed itself slowly. It wasn't just the wedding that had been lost. It was connection, trust, the chance to build something real instead of something impressive. He asked himself a question he had never allowed before. What if listening had been the stronger choice? Across the city, the janitor carried a different weight. Being right had not brought relief. It brought attention he never wanted. His routine was disrupted. His invisibility, once a shield, was gone. People whispered. Some treated him with respect. Others with suspicion. Truth had made him visible. He felt the cost of speaking up in small ways. Fewer casual greetings. More careful conversations. A sense that he now occupied a space he never asked for. Yet, despite the discomfort, his conscience was quiet. He had done what he believed was right. That knowledge didn't erase fear, but it steadied him. At night, he reflected on his own past, the moments when silence had cost him dearly. He knew that staying quiet would have haunted him far longer than the consequences he now faced. Both men, in different rooms and different lives, were learning the same lesson. Blindness protects comfort. Truth demands courage. The billionaire began to understand that power without humility creates isolation. That authority without listening invites collapse. The systems he built had been strong but brittle, unable to bend when challenged. The janitor, meanwhile, recognized that truth does not promise safety. It only promises honesty. And honesty often stands alone. Neither man was free yet. The billionaire still struggled with regret, with the knowledge that some losses could not be reversed. Apologies, he realized, did not restore trust instantly. Reflection did not undo damage. The janitor still faced uncertainty, unsure how long his job would last, unsure how his life would settle after the disruption. But something had shifted. For the first time, the billionaire felt a quiet respect for the man he had once dismissed. Not because of the outcome, but because of the courage it took to speak without power. And for the first time, the janitor considered that forgiveness might one day be possible. Not because it was deserved, but because holding anger felt heavier than letting it go. Power had changed hands, not in wealth or status but in understanding. And understanding, once gained, demands a response. The palace courtyard felt different that evening. The noise was gone. No music. No celebration. No crowd waiting for something grand to happen. Just quiet. The sun was sinking slowly behind the tall stone walls, painting the ground in soft gold and long shadows. The same place that once held pride and power now felt small. Honest. The billionaire stood alone for a moment before walking forward. There was no audience this time. No cameras. No applause. Just him, and the man he once dismissed. The janitor stood near a stone pillar, holding nothing in his hands. He wasn't cleaning. He wasn't working. He was simply there, calm as always. The billionaire stopped a few steps away. For years, he had entered rooms expecting attention, respect, obedience. Today he entered with none of that. His shoulders were lower. His posture less rigid. His voice, when he finally spoke, did not carry authority. It carried weight. I should have listened. The words were simple. They didn't echo. They didn't shake the ground. But they were real. The janitor watched him quietly. No anger in his face. No pride either. Just stillness. The billionaire continued. I believed success meant I knew better. I believed power meant I was right. He paused, searching for honesty instead of control. I was wrong. Saying it did not fix anything. It did not bring back the wedding. It did not erase the headlines. It did not restore what had been broken. But it changed something inside him. For the first time, he was not speaking to protect his image. He was speaking because the truth no longer scared him. The janitor let the silence sit between them. Silence had once been used to dismiss him. Now it held space for something different. You tried, the billionaire said softly. You warned me. And I made you feel small. The janitor finally spoke, his voice steady and calm. I did what I believed was right. There was no accusation in it. No demand for apology. Just a statement. That made it heavier. The billionaire nodded slowly. He understood now that redemption was not about dramatic gestures. It wasn't about public speeches or large donations. It wasn't about rebuilding reputation. It was about facing someone you hurt and not hiding behind power. I cannot undo what happened, he said. But I can choose who I become next. The janitor studied him carefully. Not judging. Not rushing. Forgiveness, he knew, was not a gift you hand out easily. It was something that grows when truth stays consistent. You have learned, the janitor replied quietly. That is a beginning. Not praise. Not approval. Just acknowledgement. The wind moved softly through the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the walls, life continued. The city did not stop for one man's fall or another man's courage. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Relief. Not because everything was solved, but because he was no longer pretending. He did not offer money. He did not offer status. He did not try to fix the past with something loud. Instead, he offered something small. Respect. He extended his hand, not as a command, not as a transaction, but as an equal. The janitor looked at it for a moment, then shook it. The gesture was simple, almost ordinary, and yet it meant more than any grand celebration ever could. Because redemption is never grand. It does not arrive with music. It does not shine under chandeliers. It happens quietly, when pride steps aside, and truth is finally welcomed. Morning arrived gently over the palace. The same walls that once echoed with music and celebration now stood quiet under soft sunlight. The courtyard felt clean, so almost new. Time had moved forward. The janitor walked through the gates as he always had, early, unnoticed, steady. The sky was pale gold above him. The air felt lighter than it had in weeks. He carried his tools the same way, wore the same simple robe, took the same careful steps across the stone floor. Nothing about him looked different, but something inside him had settled. He had spoken when it mattered. He had stood in truth without raising his voice. And now he returned to his quiet routine, not because he was invisible, but because he chose peace over recognition. He did not need applause. Across the courtyard, the billionaire stood alone. No advisors. No guards close by. No crowd waiting for instructions. Just him. He watched the sunrise stretch across the ancient walls. For the first time in many years, he was not thinking about expansion or control or reputation. He was thinking about listening. The wedding that never happened no longer felt like a public embarrassment. Felt like a turning point. He understood something now that success had never taught him. Power can build empires, but humility builds trust. He had spent years believing that strength meant never bending, that leadership meant never doubting, that wealth meant wisdom. Now he knew better. Wisdom sometimes comes from unexpected places, from quiet voices, from people the world overlooks. The janitor passed nearby, and for a brief moment their eyes met. There was no dramatic exchange, no speech, just recognition. Two men who had both paid a price, one for speaking, one for ignoring, and both had changed. In the distance the city began to wake. Market stalls opened. Children ran through narrow streets. Life continued, unaware of the lessons learned inside palace walls. The billionaire took a slow breath. He would rebuild, but differently this time. Slower. More carefully. With ears open. Not every warning arrives loudly. Some come gently. Respectfully. From someone you almost fail to see. And the true test of character is not how high you rise, but whether you are willing to listen. Before the fall, the sunlight grew stronger, filling the courtyard with warmth. The palace still stood. The city still lived. And the lesson remained. Truth does not need status. It only needs courage to speak, and wisdom to hear.